Welcome to the Addiction Connection podcast, connecting the hope of the gospel with the heart of addiction. I'm your host, Mark Shaw. My friend C.J. McMurray, in an earlier podcast, talked about the respectable sin, which is not respectable at all. But that podcast, he talked about discontentment being a respectable sin and being something that is kind of hidden and not one of those biggies like adultery and lying and thieving and so forth. So that inspired me to do this podcast about discontentment. And I want to commend this book to you, if you can see it, Discontentment by Lou Priolo. Of course, Lou is my mentor. He just went on to be with the Lord in victory just a few months ago. 6 or 7 months ago, not even a year. So we miss him. It's also a time where about 5 years ago, David Pallison died and went to be with the Lord. And then 6 months before that, five and a half years ago, Jay Adams went to be with the Lord. So, and we lost Skip Ione. If you knew Skip, he passed away and went to be with the Lord. So we have lost, and other great saints in the biblical counseling world that were true biblical counselors. Well, with discontentment, I learned so much from Lou, and in this little booklet, he starts out with a parable. I want to read this parable to you. It's Luke 12, starting in verse 13. The key verse is verse 15, and it says this. I'm going to read the whole parable. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Can you imagine somebody telling Jesus that? "Hey, Jesus, can you tell this brother of mine that he needs to divide this inheritance with me?" I mean, you're giving Jesus an opportunity to teach here in a big way. But Jesus said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?" And then Jesus said to them, "Take care." So this is Jesus talking. "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." Man, we can stop right there, right? The abundance of our possessions. It's so easy to get wrapped up in what we think we need and desire, and yet God tells us, don't. Jesus right here, your life doesn't consist in the abundance of possessions. Tough for people who have lots of possessions to not let those possessions have them. But many people can do that. I know great godly Christians who are blessed with wealth, and it's not a sin. It's great. They utilize that wealth to be able to help and serve other people and to worship God and do a lot of great things. And so thankful for so many people who do that. But Jesus is talking more about your identity. Your identity. Be on guard against all covetousness. So that's really where discontentment comes from. As we'll look at this little booklet, Discontentment by Lou Priolo, trying to get my ears situated there. He starts out in the booklet saying, you don't find the word discontentment really in many places, Bible, and people would say, well, what's the opposite of discontentment? It's contentment. But he says the biblical word is covetousness, biblical language, and being content. And he starts off the booklet that we are to be content with that we have Jesus in relationship. He'll never leave us or forsake us. And that's an awesome thought in Hebrews 13:5. And it's in other places. So that's assurance of salvation. And for those who struggle with addiction, we have to help them with assurance of salvation to know they can't lose their salvation. And that's just such a wicked teaching to me, to tell people you can lose your salvation if you don't do this or do that, or, it's as though performance is how you even got your salvation, and performance is how you keep your salvation. It depends on performance. My salvation does, but not my performance, Jesus's performance. And he did it one time. And so now that I'm born again, I've repented of my sin, placed my faith and trust in Jesus Christ alone. I'm not banking on my good deeds and my good works to get me into heaven. I'm banking on Jesus's performance, and that's the only performance that matters. And so that's at the heart of discontentment. I think you can be discontent with worldly possessions, as we've read in this parable. Let me continue on with the parable. So Jesus is teaching them about covetousness. And then in verse 16, he told them a parable saying, the land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build large ones. And there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. So it's not laying up treasures for yourself only in this parable. The teaching is laying up treasure for yourself and not being rich toward God. Now, I'm not saying lay up treasures for yourself. You lay up treasures to be wise and prudent and handle money and wealth responsibly, so that you can be a blessing to God in whatever way he calls you to do that. But you better be rich toward God. You better be hungry, studying his word, praying, spending time with him, spending time in fellowship in your church. You got to be rich toward God in that way. And so that's what the parable is teaching, is building bigger barns, bigger stuff, more stuff. Tonight, your soul's required of you. It was a foolish thing to just go bigger and bigger. I had a really good friend. I mean, probably my best friend ever, died when he was 37. And it was really sad. We were best friends and kind of drifted apart. And he told me a regret that he had maybe 4 or 5 years before he died, that he had owned a pizza restaurant and he was doing successfully. He was managing it successfully. That's what I want to say. And he did a great job with it. So what he did is what all Americans are tempted to do, right? When we have a business and it's going successfully, he opened another store. And he opened it, 40 minutes away. And he had to drive through traffic in a big city, big town. And he told me, he said, Mark, you know what? If I'd have known what I know now about managing 2 stores, 2 sets of employees, 2 different cultures, 2 different, all the twos, right? He said, I'm not making any more money right now than I was managing 1 store. And I spoke to a guy at church this past Sunday who has a business, and he said, I had 5 locations in his particular heating and air business. He said, I had 5 locations, 5 sets of employees and all this. And he said, you know what? I'm managing 1 location. It's just me and my wife, and we're as successful as we ever were. We're making the same amount of money. Now I understand you can make more money with more, this is not a business. I'm not the guy to give business advice or counsel. But my point with both of these stories is sometimes we think bigger is better and more is better. And when we breed that discontentment or a covetousness of something, we really want something. It can drive us to where we miss God. And that was the point of the parable. Jesus just took an opportunity to teach this man and all these folks about the importance of being rich toward God. And I love that phrase. Think about that. Are you rich toward God? The headline in my Bible before this parable says, the parable of the rich fool, a rich fool. Well, that's kind of harsh language, but that's what this guy is. He's being foolish, and with his wealth and riches and building more and more on this earth. And so he's going to live forever. Listen, none of us are going to live forever. That's why I started with Lou Priolo. We're doing his booklet. He is not living any longer, but we have books like this. David Pallison 5 years ago. We have his material and his books. Praise the Lord for him. Jay Adams as well, and Scipione, and all those guys made great contributions. Well, Lou talks about discontentment. He even, in typical Lou Priolo fashion, as I like to say, has a biblical contentment inventory, and it's questions that you take. There's 25 of them, and you score it 4 points apiece to see how much you battle with being discontent. And so he says, like the first one, I'm prone to murmur and complain when things in my life do not go as I wish. And so you rate yourself from a 0 to a 4. Are you prone to murmur when things don't go as you wish? Well, I know I am. I am prone to murmur, not prone to wander, but prone to murmur and complain when I don't get things to go as I wish. And really, I'm learning how to biblically lament how when things aren't the way that I think they should be, and maybe even it's biblical, the way I'm thinking is like, hey, this should be a different way. I need to lament. I need to pray and say to God, God, I don't like this. I know this situation isn't my preference. I also know, Lord, you can change it if you want to. I know nothing's too hard, too difficult for you. But Lord, if you don't change this, then help change me in my heart and my perspective. Help me to see it the way you want me to see it, as you see it, and grow me in this so that I can trust you in a greater way. So I think that's the key with lament is, God, you can change it. I want you to change it. But if you don't change it, change me and change how I see and how I think about this particular thing. So Lou would do those inventories, and they're great. Then he's got some principles here. I'm just going to read them to you and talk about them briefly. The first one is contentment is realizing that God has already provided everything that a person needs to glorify and enjoy him. So contentment is the realization of, God, you've given me everything I need. Man, I'll tell you, if you can practice that in the morning, it's life-changing. And as many of you know, I teach on addictions all the time, and I have the 5 marks of a transforming addict, and one of them is gratitude. And gratitude comes from a content heart, what Lou is talking about. So for addiction counseling, you better be helping your counselee to be grateful, to be content with what God has given them. And I talk about the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, pride of life. The underlying idea there is a lack of contentment, discontentment, and coveting. I want another pleasure, lust of the flesh. I want another possession, lust of the eyes. I want more power to control my reputation and have people like me or see me as I want them to see me, whatever that may be for different people. And so all of that is fueled by discontentment. I mean, he gives practical. I'm not going to give everything here because I want you to get the book, get the little booklet. I mean, this is a short little booklet, 40 pages, and it's got gold, just chock full of gold. But he gives very practical ways to grow in contentment. Now, the second thing he says, the principle here is contentment is realizing that true satisfaction can come only from building one's life around those things that cannot be taken away or destroyed. Contentment is realizing true satisfaction can only come from building one's life around those things that cannot be taken away or destroyed. That's deep. Here's Matthew 6:19-21. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, being rich toward God, right? Where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in or steal. That'd be nice. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So we're putting more stock in, more confidence in the things that are eternal rather than things that are temporal and will rust away or become destroyed or stolen from us. And there's power in that because that's where your heart is. It's all about the heart, what Jesus teaches. That's why I wrote the Heart of Addiction book. It's really about your heart desires. It's not about the thing you're addicted to. You might be addicted to gambling, pornography, alcohol, drugs, fentanyl. I mean, it could be anything. But what God's after is your heart. And if your treasure is in heaven, there your heart will be also. You'll have an eternal mindset. You'll give to people. Isn't it a blessing to give? Well, I'm challenging you today. Give to somebody. I mean, even if it's $10, you're at Walmart and there's somebody there. I wouldn't, I mean, I'm not saying give person begging on the street corner. You can do that. But find somebody that you could just bless. Give them $10. Give them something. Give them your place in line if you don't want to give them $10. Give to them. Be a giver. Be somebody who's giving. I've learned this from some dear friends and people along the way that are just givers, and I've learned to be a better giver. I wish I could say, man, I'm a giving person. At times I am, and I love to give, but at times I miss opportunities. I'm sure you do too. So today, give to somebody. Do it today. Don't delay. Find somebody to give something to and give it away. Don't loan it out, and I hope I get this back, or loan it out or give it in the hopes that you're going to, I'm going to give 10 and I'm hoping I get 100 back. You know, I'm going to give God and he's going to give me. And don't do that. That's not what we're talking about. Just give and have no expectation of ever getting anything back in return. That's the kind of giving that I like to do, is helping people that can't help me. Number 3, third principle in Lou's booklet called Discontentment. Why am I so unhappy? Contentment is delighting in God more than anything else. Well, we've looked at that, you know, and Calvin talked about our hearts are a perpetual factory of idols. Delight yourself, seek your happiness, in other words, in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. That's Psalm 37:4. Well, it's talking about when my heart is delighting in him and in his things and in his work, then he's going to give me the desires of my heart, which are in heaven. I'm rich toward God. He's going to give me those things. He's not talking about giving you a new boat, a new car, and a new house, and a lot of bling. I just like that word, bling. He's talking about giving you the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Lou gives a fishing illustration as he does. He loved to fish. He just loved to fish. Principle number 4, contentment is being able to adjust the level of one's desires to the condition and purpose chosen for him by God. Here's what Philippians 4:11-12 says, Apostle Paul's NIV version of the Bible. I'm not saying this because I'm in need or I've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. And that's really the truth. That's where contentment can cut across whatever your circumstances are. A book that Lou recommends you read is Jeremiah Burroughs, a great Puritan author, The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment. And he gives a couple of definitions in that book. All right, number 5. Contentment is willingly submitting to and delighting in God's wise and loving disposal in every condition of life. Well, that's really important because, again, it kind of goes along with the last one, being content in every situation. You know, Job said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And all this Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. He didn't charge God with wrongdoing. Isn't that great? my good friends, Fred and Lauri Bucci, and they're on council. You can hear their testimony. They taught a workshop last year at the summit. They talk about this with the death of their son. And their son, Danny, died right after graduation before going to college. And he had a bad trip on hallucinogenic drugs, mushrooms or whatever he was taking. And he ran down the street naked. It's all caught on camera by the police cam. And he jumped on the hood of the police car, and he was shot, ended up getting shot in the abdomen. He had a knife. He was bleeding. He was out of control. Police were just trying to defend themselves from this guy who was out of his mind and trying to help him. And he was throwing bricks through windows in the street. I mean, he was out of control. There's no doubt about it. And he got shot and died. And they just powerfully sing songs at our summit. And it's on video. If you subscribe to Council, you can watch it, where they are praising God as Job did, And the song that they sing, the Lord gives, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. What a great song to sing when you're thinking about great loss and tragedy. So they find opportunities in the death of their son. It's powerful. It inspires you. Again, you can subscribe to Council and watch it. It's just amazing. And the Buccis are dear friends. Number 6, and you can pray for them. They have some health challenges that they're dealing with this year, so they may not be able to come to the summit, but we'll be praying that they'll recover well and be in their original founding members of the Addiction Connection. So very grateful for their friendship over the years and their support and help in the ministry. Number 6, contentment is knowing how to use the things of the world without being engrossed in them. Now that's being a wealthy Christian and being able to use the things of the world, but not caught up in it, not letting those things have you. Lou goes on to unpack this to a great extent and does a really good job with that. He has a Richard Baxter quote. I don't know if you guys know this about me. I don't think I've ever said it, but I just love Richard Baxter. Of course, he's with Jesus now, but I'm very thankful for his ministry in my life and my heart. Here's what he says. Richard Baxter says, "Remember to what ends all worldly things were made and given you. They are the provender of our bodies, our traveling furniture and helps, our ends and solacing company in the way. They are some of God's love tokens, some of the lesser pieces of his coin, and bear his image and superscription. They are drops from the river of the eternal pleasures to tell the mind by the way of the senses how good the donor," that's talking about God, the donor is, "and how amiable, and what higher delights there are for souls, and to point us to the better things which these foretell. They are messengers from heaven to testify our Father's care and love, and to bespeak our thankfulness, love, and duty, and to bear witness against sin and bind us faster to obedience. They are the tools by which we must do much of our Master's work. They are means by which we may refresh our brethren and express our love to one another and our love to our Lord and Master in his servants. They are our Master's stock, which we must trade with. These are the uses to which God gives us outward mercies. Love them thus, Love them thus, and delight in them, and use them thus, and spare not. Yea, seek them thus, and be thankful for them. But when the creatures are given for so excellent a use, will you debase them all by making them only the fuel of your lusts and the provisions for your flesh? And will you love them and dote upon them in these basic respects while you utterly neglect their noblest use? So Richard Baxter is saying the stuff that God gives you, rejoice in it, use it. It bears his name. If he gives you a financial blessing or a swimming pool or whatever thing in your life, enjoy it. It's a blessing from him. Don't just use it for your own lust and provisions of your flesh. Use those things for further ministry, further delight in Him, for helping other people and serving in that way. So it's a great, great reminder. And you can see why I like Richard Baxter. He's just so flavorful in his pictures. And I like that. I like people that can paint a picture for me and I can see it and imagine as I'm reading. Number 7, contentment. This is back to Lou's book. Number 7, contentment is thanking God even in circumstances in which one used to murmur and complain. So when you get to the place, I always say this in public, when I'm teaching certain workshops, I say, true Christians, born again believers, talk about the red lights in their lives as blessings. The mature Christians, maturing Christians. So the baby Christian says, God is good, green lights are good. Satan is bad, red lights are bad. Satan, God, green light, God, red light, Satan. Let me give thanks for the green lights, but let me curse those red lights. Well, there's some shred of truth in that, but maturing Christians realize God's over the whole thing. He's not just a green light. He's over the red lights too. He's over the red lights in your life. And the quicker you understand that, the better. Again, this is lament. God, I don't like the red light. I don't like these circumstances. I know nothing's too difficult for you. Would you please change this? But if not, Lord, would you change me and how I'm seeing it and how I'm seeing you and how I'm viewing and let me see the redemptive nature. God's going to redeem it. He's going to change it and he's going to use it for good. And so that's the final principle here, these 7 principles for developing contentment. And I really think that's what separates the men from the boys, is learning to be content in circumstances that you used to murmur and complain in. And then he has suggestions for developing contentment. I got to share these with you real quickly. Again, I want you to get the booklet. There's so much more in the booklet than I can cover here in this quick podcast. Be sure you truly understand the nature and scope of your own covetousness. That's tough, right? But he says, search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there be any hurtful way in me and lead me in the everlasting way. So that's taking personal inventory is what the addiction world will say, but recognizing that there's nothing wrong with that. I got to recognize what is in me and what desires do I have. Lust of flesh, lust of eyes, and pride of life are the 3 that I use to analyze what am I wanting here? What's my motivation? And then pray daily and that God would help you dethrone your idolatrous desires and give you a greater love for Him. So it's two-pronged process. It's a put off, put on. Dethrone those idolatrous desires, and then God, fill me with a greater love for you and your people. I would say your church, God's people. Number 3, train yourself to thank and praise the Lord when first tempted to murmur and complain. So our first response, all right, I'll just admit mine, and CJ alluded to this in a podcast, is the first response is to want to complain and murmur. But God is teaching us, don't do that. Instead, find a way to thank God for that situation, that circumstance. That's hard to do. But it just takes practice. And after a while, you get good at it, just like you get good at playing the piano or playing the saxophone or swimming laps or whatever you're practicing and doing. You can tell them in Florida, I'm talking about swimming pools and swimming laps. Then number 4, remember that your greatest needs cannot be met by temporal pleasures. Make good interpretation of God's dealings with you. So believe the best about God. That's hard for some people to do. 6, consider food, clothing, and shelter your only temporal necessities. That's the only thing that you have to have. You hear that? Food, clothing, and shelter. It's the only thing I got to have. I got to have food. I got to have clothing. I got to have a shelter. Everything else is God's grace. And really, even that's God's grace, we understand. But Those are the things we have to survive. That's the idea. We think we have to have all this other stuff to survive, but we don't. Develop the mindset of a soldier. That's number 7. Do not set your heart on the temporal comforts and pleasures that God allows you to enjoy. We've talked about that. Number 9, remember that the more you have, the greater will be your degree of accountability. To whom much is given, much is required. That's really in the context of being thankful. But it's important words from Jesus. From everyone who has been given much, much will be required. And to whom they entrusted much of him, they will ask all the more. Luke 12:48. So he gives you an exercise to do that. Make a list of your top 3 temporal pleasures and write out a paragraph for each one. And if you're prone to spend too much time thinking about or obsessing over one, why not spend a day investing as much time, minute for minute, thinking about how you'll give an account for that delight as you invest in taking pleasure in it. And then he ends with an Arthur Pink quote. Instead of complaining at his lot, a contented man is thankful that his condition and circumstances are no worse than they are. Instead of greedily desiring something more than the supply of his present need, he rejoices that God still cares for him. Such a one is content with such as he has. Arthur W. Pink. And he's got thankfulness lists at the end to help you. This is a great counseling booklet. It's a great booklet for you to buy and go through yourself, then to utilize in counseling with people who are struggling. And you better believe addiction is driven by this, because less the flesh, less the eyes, pride of life. All 3 can be driven by this particular thing. It's an Achilles heel for all of us. So we have to be careful. We have to grow and build contentment. We have to say, Lord, I don't need anything else. I got you. I got you. And that's all I need. Well, I appreciate you joining me today. And we will do this again soon. Take care and God bless.